All About Writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 51, part 8 of our series on writing life. I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher.
And I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter. And today, we're talking about collaborative projects. This is when you, as an author, get to work with someone else to create something, which is kind of neat because I know a lot of us as authors think that it's a very lonely business. You know, you're sitting there by yourself with your keyboard, typing away, and it can sometimes seem really strange to be able to talk to anybody else about it. But in a collaborative project, you got someone there with you all the time. How cool is that? So we're going to break that down and talk about collaborative projects. So Sara, I know you've done a few. What are your thoughts on collaborative projects?
Well, and I do want to put a caveat on this. This is not ghostwriting. So ghostwriting is also a collaborative type of writing, and that's when when you, as the quote author, your name is on the entire thing. The ghostwriter has no say, no word, no byline. They essentially don't exist anywhere on paper ever in that process, no matter how much time and effort they put into the project. Whereas what we're talking about today with collaborative writing is where you are working together. Both of your names will probably appear on the project, whether it's a screenplay or it's a book. And so it is a lot more collaborative that way. And I also want to start by saying, depending on how you plan to do this, you probably want to have something in writing, depending on your relationship. If you're bringing in somebody who is kind of a professional co-writer, you probably want a contract on how your names are going to appear on the book, in what order, who gets the credit for it, how you're going to split any royalties or, money that is made on the book, any costs that come up with the book, things like that. Whereas, other collaborative projects are a lot more loose because it's two people who know each other well and trust each other. And it is a true collaboration that's less a business transaction and more just two people coming together to build a book or build a screenplay. And I would say most of my experiences have been that the latter, where it is collaborative between two people who trust each other. And it's awesome because you just get to sit for hours and bounce ideas off each other. I mean, Ben, you and I have collaborated on several projects, and that's really, it just becomes a party of writing. And what about this? What about this? What about this? And it's a lot more exciting as an entire process because, like you said, you're not alone. That's probably the best part.
Yeah. And you raise a really good point about how do you get into one of these collaborative projects. When Sara, you first started laying out some of the legalities and everything, I thought, oh dear, we're going to scare everybody away because this doesn't sound fun at all. And it's true. If you're going to be hiring someone to work with you, or you've sort of been put together as a team, and you don't know each other, definitely, yes, I agree with Sara 100%. You want to sort of protect yourself and make sure that everything is going to be credited properly. But very often, that aside, which is all true, that aside, it is the second example, which is where a lot of collaborative partnerships start, which is just two people who know each other and they share a common interest and they have a neat idea and they just want to make it work. And there can be a bunch of reasons why you might decide to partner with someone else for writing. One of them is just you get along, you got a neat idea, and it's fun. And sometimes you will bring different specializations. One of you will know far more about, a genre than the other, but the other one has some great ideas that they want to dive in. So you sort of work together like that. Or I know when we first worked together, Sara, you knew screenwriting better than I did. And so, I had the idea, but you had the expertise to actually take my idea and turn it into something that is actually a screenplay. So yeah, it can be a lot of fun. Like you said right away, Sara, how, working with someone can be fun. And I think it's an interesting thing for writers to consider because writing can be so solitary, and if you've been a writer for a while by yourself, it can be a bit of a mental shift to working with someone else. And the biggest reason is just because when you're the sole author of a story, you and you alone make the decisions. So if you like an idea, you run with it. And as soon as you've got somebody else in the mix, what happens when they don't like the idea? What do you do? So this is one of the challenges that you can face with a collaboration.
And collaboration is the right word. Another way you could say is the writing is a compromise writing, because you're constantly having to bounce ideas and share and tweak. And the best thing you can bring to the table when you decide to work collaboratively is to leave your ego behind you and to come without an ego. Because, not to get walked all over by the other person if they forgot to check their ego at the door, but because neither of you can come and be kind of strong arming the project. Because then, really, what's the collaboration for? It's two people going, yep, I'm gonna come at this with an open mind and be constantly willing to shift and collaborate and compromise to get the best story. And then there'll be times where you're like, no, I think that this idea stands, or there's a reason we need to keep this in there because we're going to lose sight of the big theme or whatever. And you push back on each other and listen to each other. But anytime you're doing any type of collaborative project, which I know we've talked about before with many of our other episodes, is that, really not coming in with the my way or it's the highway mentality is at all going to serve you. Then you shouldn't even bother to bring in another person unless you're really just wanting them to do the grunt work, and then you should pay them. That it's
Yeah,
not truly collaboration.
that's right. That's a
Um,
good point. Yeah.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, I love, like, there's so many ways to do it too. Like, does some person put down the first draft and the other person does the heavy edit? Do you trade chapters? When I've done screenwriting, sometimes with other people, it's I'm going to write the first 10 pages, you write the next 10, and you just go back and forth. Or, um, I, there's just so many ways to do collaborative writing, and there's no real rule, which is what's really exciting and fun about it as well. We keep saying fun because it is fun. It is, you're rejuvenated because you're feeding each other creative juices constantly, especially if you're coming in without that ego.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good skill for any author to learn anyway, because when
Yeah.
you work with an editor, you've also got to check your ego. Because your
Yes.
editor is going to have ideas, going to want to change things, and if you're fighting your editor the whole way along, it's going to be painful. So it can actually be a good place to learn it is with another creative, because you should theoretically be of sort of equal position as the two creators. So you need to be able to give, and it's okay to disagree. It's okay to have different ideas, but like you said, Sarah, it's how you handle that, how you listen, how you. I mean, you've used the word compromise, and I don't know if that's necessarily the right word. It sometimes is, but just um, to find a mutual way forward. Like, okay, you've got a good idea, I've got a good idea. How can we make these two good ideas work together? And that's can get the creativity flowing. And one thing I find uh, with collaboration is that the end result, if you work well together, the end result will be better than anything that I could have made or you could have made, because there's a richer perspective as two people come together, and it just is better. But it does take a little bit of work along the way.
Well, it's a partnership. It's a partnership on a piece of intellectual property. And I was going to say exactly what you said. It is a better project because you have two sets of eyes coming in from the very beginning. So in a way, you're almost self-editing ahead of your editor seeing it, because you have two people constantly checking each other and finding holes you might not have seen in the plots or in the way that it's flowing. And um I've always been pleased. I've never walked away from a collaboration, no matter who I'm doing it with, going, that sucks.
Hmm.
That was, that's a terrible piece of project. I'm so disappointed in it. I'm always happy with what comes out of any type of collaborative writing. And 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 it's nice to be able to balance out, if you have a project that is a solo project, if you have some projects that are collaborative projects, getting that one collaborative kind of energy can make the solitary one not feel so daunting or so lonely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
especially if people are like, well, I'm only working on one thing, but I have these other ideas. Well, don't feel like you have to pound out all these ideas by yourself. Maybe you can collaborate with somebody so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming to have multiple ideas you alone are responsible for.
Yeah. And I hear you. I know because I do ghostwriting quite often, which is a collaborative project. I realize it's different from this, but in this case, the principle is the same. If I've been working with someone for a few months, sometimes I love to be able to just go back to my own project, which I'm working on by myself. And now I don't have to justify anything to anybody, and I can just write that scene the way I want to write it. So, both ways. It can actually rejuvenate you in both ways. Uh, Writing by yourself is good in that you have all the control, but it can also be lonely and a little exhausting. Collaborating with someone uh, brings with it challenges of getting the story across, but I find it is, like you do, Sarah, very rejuvenating. Getting that energy, knowing there's someone else out there who's as excited about this as I am, it can be really uplifting. So a balance of the two is actually very nice.
Right, right, right. And then that bleeds into the things after the project is done, right? So now you have two sets of people who can go and try and sell the project, or
Mm.
two sets of people who can help market the project, or two sets of people who can combine resources and finances to, do some sort of marketing campaign. And so it's not just even that initial collaboration. It does spill into the other parts of creating IP, and that also is the benefits to collaborative writing. And I also think that people who have never written a book, and the idea of going at it alone and sitting there with just their thoughts and their outline and their keyboard can feel, overwhelming. And I think if you kind of step back and go, no, I want to do this with somebody where they help me write my paragraphs, they're with me every step of the way, it's not just an editor, it's almost like bringing in a developmental writer with you if you're early on in the process, and the idea of doing it on your own is too much. That's also where you can maybe talk about a collaboration with someone, or someone who is further down the process than you, and see if they're interested in coming in and essentially co-writing. I mean, when we say collaborative, we're essentially saying you're co-writing something with someone because their name is next to yours on the byline.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is important to make that distinction between co-writing and working with an editor. Because working with an editor, they are there to support you. It is still you, the author, whose name is going to be on the cover, whose idea this is, and who has sort of an ultimate veto over anything that the editor suggests. When you are co-writers, it is different, and it's important to know this. It's great, don't get me wrong. It's not a warning to anyone, but just be aware that you are equals in this partnership. And there are some ways to break it down. Like you maybe, if you're listening, going, but how would I actually do it? How would it work? Um, we mentioned this a bit earlier, but I just want to sort of dive into this a little bit more. How do you actually divide up the work? And certainly you can look at who's got the expertise in what, yes, but ultimately you both want to be writing. You both want to do it. So look at your project and think, is there a way that it naturally divides? Like, for example, if you've got two point of view characters, okay, well, how about one of you each pick one of those point of view characters and write those chapters? And that can be really effective because the whole voice will be a little different, which it should be with a different point of view character. And so that could be a great way to divide it. And you, as the author, can really then own one of the point of view characters. You still care about the other one, but you recognize that your partner really owns that character, and you can kind of work together that way. Um, I know I worked on a science fiction collaboration once where I was writing from the human side, and my partner was writing from the alien side. And
Oh,
his style of writing was so different, just ephemeral and out of this world, as opposed to my very grounded military, practical side, which is what we were going for. And so um, the two sort of halves of the book were written very differently. We helped each other throughout the whole thing. Like I was helping him plot the alien side, he was working with me character development for the humans. But when it actually came to the writing, we were each able to bring our own unique voice to this book and make it come together as one. So that was really cool.
and I think that's probably the easiest way to divide labor. Because what you really don't want is somebody to feel like they're doing the majority of the work, whereas
Yeah.
the other person just gets to put their name on it, but they did, 1/4 of it. Um, so whether or not you divide up by characters or you have one character, but you kind of just um, trade chapters, or if you know you're going to write several books together, perhaps you each take a turn writing an entire book and the other one does the editing, and you vice versa. They're making sure you divide the work as equally as possible, especially if you're not going to do any contracts or any type of structure ahead of time, is really important to also make sure your collaboration doesn't decompose into feelings of anger or frustration with your writing partner. Because if you're doing most of the heavy lifting and you feel like your partner isn't doing their work and yet they're getting their name on it, you're upset. But maybe the writing partner is going, well, they're being bossy and they're controlling the whole project and not letting me have a chance to write. So communication is the key to any collaboration, and that's the same with this too. You're just adding in the dash of, creative emotion
Yeah.
with it.
And anyone who's thinking about doing this, I mean, just go in with your eyes wide open. Like there will probably be disagreements. I mean, that's fine. Doesn't mean it have to be fights, but there will be things you got to work through. I know the very first collaboration I was offered to join, it's weird because the writer had already done the whole first draft and wanted to go back and look at it and sort of wanted me to come in and help. Like, okay, but everything was already written. And so I really couldn't change anything. I was basically, he basically wanted an editor, which is
Mm.
fine, but that's not what he offered me. He said we were going to be co-writers, but he'd already written the whole first draft. So I basically said, no, in the end, this isn't going to work. There's too much imbalance here. It's too much your work. It's not mine. Um, the only other one that I had to bow out of was, yeah, like you said, Sarah, not everyone can always commit the same way. And my partner just could not put in the time, couldn't deliver. Like we take, I'll write this, then you write that. I would always deliver on time, and they would not. And thankfully, it was my partner who finally said, "I just can't do this. Like I've got too much other stuff going on," and they bowed out gracefully, which sort of saved me the uncomfortable conversation of saying, "You in this or are you not?" But those are the only two times in 40 years of writing. It's the only two times I've ever had to bow out of a collaboration. So most of the time they work really well, and I
Yeah,
really
or
enjoy them.
they die on their own. I mean, I have had one collaboration once where, it was one would write the first 20 pages, then the next person, it was a screenwriting collaboration, and the other person just never sent the rest of the work. And I was like, well, you know, thankfully had not spent that long, but you do feel like your time has been wasted by the other person just dropping the ball. I mean, that's a lot more common in screenplay writing just because it's something called production amnesia. And people just get it's squirrel, something shiny, and it's a little bit more common in my experience for scripts to kind of die a slow death of somebody not picking up their turn.
Mhm.
Um, but um but yeah, I mean, I think once you really get down to actually putting pen to paper, even you and I, we've got a collaboration on the back burner. Our lives are not conducive to, like, hitting it hard because we know what kind of commitment it'll be, but it doesn't mean it's dead. It just means not now.
Not
And
just not now.
um
That's right.
yeah, just not now. So I think in the end, what I want people to take away is, like you said, go in with your eyes wide open. Know that it can be a really positive experience if you do so, and that communication is key to your collaboration being successful.
Hmm. Yeah, I think every author will probably do better with collaboration if they've already done some writing on their own and are
Mm.
comfortable in who they are and what they can bring. But like you said, even in the earlier days, if you just feel like you need some help getting this project done, if you find the right person, it can be the perfect solution.
Yep, exactly. Yay. Well, and I know that's our show. That's really all we need to impart on this topic in broad terms. But I also would hope that if people have questions about this or any specifics that might be tangential, please, you know, um, let us know, because this is just touching on something that can really, we can get into the weeds on the contracts, right, or things like that. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats, especially if we dive into this in depth. And please feel free to leave a review, which helps us a ton. And don't forget, you can find Ben at Bennett R. Coles, as well as on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can catch up with Sara at sarahdahlman.com and on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.